Systematically studying ethics means studying ethical arguments. The arguments we typically make or hear are often abbreviated or incomplete. That is to say, instead of being a logical progression of statements, ethical arguments, at least as ordinarily encountered, are often a statement of the facts and then a moral judgment. The missing intermediate steps that connect the facts with the moral conclusion might be implicitly understood by everyone concerned, but it is important for our purposes to make all the steps in a moral argument transparent and explicit. In the readings, Rachel discusses several moral arguments. The first one is the case of baby Teresa, an infant born anencephalitic. Her parents want to donate her organs before she dies. The issue is whether this donation is ethical. What does that mean? It does not mean what does the law say. It does not mean what does religion say. It does not mean what do most people say. It means what does ethical reasoning say. Ethical reasoning consists of a correct argument with an ethical judgment about the donation. Let's begin by describing the conclusion. Generally, there are three kinds of ethical judgment. The matter could be morally obligatory, morally forbidden, or morally permissible. A judgment of moral obligation is a judgment about what you must do. This is typical of moral commandments such as you must keep your promises. In the case of baby Teresa, a judgment that the donation is morally obligatory is to say that the parents are morally obligated to donate the infant's organs. They would be acting immorally if they did not donate the baby's organs. A judgment of moral prohibition is a judgment about what you must not do, about what is forbidden to do. This is typical of moral commandments such as you must not kill, you must not steal. In the case of baby Teresa, a judgment that the donation is morally forbidden is to say that parents are morally prohibited from donating the infant's organs. They must not do so. They would be acting immorally if they did donate the baby's organs. It might seem unnecessary to distinguish so explicitly the judgments about moral obligations from judgments about moral prohibitions, since they are just opposites. But making this contrast explicit helps us to see a third kind of moral judgment. Something might be neither obligatory nor forbidden, and it might simply be permissible. For example, suppose someone were trapped in a burning building and you were nearby. Most people would say you are not morally obligated to risk your life and try to rescue that person, nor are you morally forbidden to rescue that person. You are, morally speaking, permitted to try to rescue that person. In the case of baby Teresa, a judgment that the donation is morally permissible is to say that the parents can, as far as the ethics goes, donate the infant's organs. But they would not be acting immorally if they did not donate the baby's organs. To summarize, in the case of baby Teresa, we have three different kinds of moral judgments to consider. The parents must donate the baby's organs, the parents must not donate the baby's organs, or the parents may donate the baby's organs. Let's now consider how to argue for one of these conclusions. Broadly speaking, a moral argument consists of three parts. One part consists of a statement of the facts. In the case of baby Teresa, this would include statements about the infant's medical condition, its prognosis, what donating her organs would involve, etc. A different part of a moral argument consists of stating the relevant moral principles. This is the center of the moral argument, since the moral principles connect the facts with the moral conclusion, which is the final part of the moral argument. In the reading, Rachel shows different moral principles that could be inserted into the argument. For example, if we insert as a moral principle that it is wrong to take the life of a person under any circumstances, then the moral conclusion is that donating the infant's organs is morally wrong, forbidden, because removing the organs would end the life of the infant. If, on the other hand, we use the moral principle that we should benefit others by saving as many lives as possible, then the moral conclusion is that donating the infant's organs is morally required, since baby Teresa would soon die and her transplanted organs could save the lives of other infants. Finally, if we take as the moral principle that sacrificing one life to save many is ethically justifiable, then the moral conclusion is that the parents may donate their baby's organs. This illustrates how the moral conclusion turns on the moral principle invoked. A disagreement over the ethics of donating baby Teresa's organs will turn on the disagreement over which moral principles should be employed. It's unlikely that the disagreement would be over the facts of the case, but if that were so, then the disagreement could be settled by a straightforward investigation of the facts. In most cases, however, a disagreement in specific moral judgments is a result of a disagreement over the relevant moral principles. This leads to the question, how do we judge between different moral principles? How can we determine which moral principles are the correct ones to be used in a moral argument? The answer involves taking up one of two different approaches. The first approach is an internal assessment of the principles. For example, is the principle too broad to be plausible? In the case we have been discussing, we use the principle, it is wrong to take the life of a person under any circumstances. That principle can easily be challenged since it is so general, without exceptions. It would seem to condemn the use of lethal force even if that were necessary for self-defense. That is a consequence most people would reject, and so most people would reject that broad moral principle. Furthermore, one might question the applicability of the moral principle by examining the meaning of some of its terms. For example, the moral principle refers to taking the life of a person, but does that include encephalitic infants who lack a cerebrum and cerebellum and lack any awareness and will die within days in any case? In some. The first approach examines the meaning and scope of the employed moral principles to see if they are truly applicable to the case at hand. The second approach proceeds by examining the credentials of what is being claimed to be a moral principle. This consists in relating the alleged moral principle to an ethical theory. Suppose we claimed the following as a moral principle. Children are the parents' property, and so the parents are free to do anything to their children, including killing them and donating their organs. To be sure, many people would not accept this alleged moral principle, but that is merely a matter of sociology. What has been considered acceptable parental treatment of children has certainly varied through time. We can ask, however, a tougher question. Can that alleged moral principle fit with, be justified by, an ethical theory? As it turns out, it cannot, and it is one of the goals of this course to show you how this works. We can see now that there are three levels of moral claims: specific moral judgments, broad moral principles, and ethical theory. The specific moral judgments are about the individual cases and typically assess a particular action, whether it is ethical or not. The moral principles are the general maxims, rules, or commandments about what you should or should not do. They are what most people think of as the stuff of morality. Ethical theory is a general position that attempts to explain why these moral principles are in fact moral principles. If a so-called moral principle cannot be explained by an ethical theory, then we have good reason to question whether that principle is in fact a moral principle at all. I'll have more to say about these last few statements in subsequent lectures. For now, let's begin by going over some of these points in an exercise.